Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 2nd of December 2018. So you know what's the richest place in the world is? It's the graveyard, because it is here that you will find all hopes and dreams that were never fulfilled, the books that were never written, the songs that were never sung, the inventions that were never shared, the cures that were never discovered, all because someone was too afraid to take that first step, keep up with the problem, or determined to carry out their dream. So I pray that your richest place is your mind, your dreams that you have to live with. Work hard, play harder, accomplish your dreams, and knock your magical destiny by unlocking the doors of Labasna. So live with your dream and live for your dream, because when you find that your feet is so tired that you cannot walk, just feel like giving it up, fight that one more round. When your arms are so numb that you can hardly lift up your hands, fight that one more round. Remember that individuals who always fight that one more round can never lose. So this is the expectation from you, the warriors, to never give up. So let's get started and look into the first article. So the first article says central guidelines for creatures at workplaces. So what is the context here? So the context here says that center has prepared guidelines for setting up of creatures at workplaces which prescribe trained personnel to man the facility, as well as infrastructure requirements, as well as the safety norms. So the first question that pops up is, what is the creche? So a creche is nothing but a nursery or a daycare center for babies as well as young children. So in order to understand what the guidelines are provided for these creatures, we will have to understand one of the important acts, and that is the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act of 2017. So what does this act say? So it says that this particular act is applicable to all those organizations and institutions which have more than 10 employees. So in case there is an organization which has 10 or more number of employees, then such Maternity Benefit Act is applicable to this institution. So this law that was passed by the Parliament in the year 2017 basically extends the maternity leave for a period from about 12 weeks to about 26 weeks. So initially what was at about 12 weeks has now been extended to about 26 weeks. So the basic aim of this act is to regulate the employment of women during the period of childbirth. But the most important point that we have to understand here is that this particular option that is provided for women is restricted only for 2 childbirths. In case a woman already has 2 children, then the duration of leave remains to 12 weeks and not for 26 weeks. So this is what we need to understand with respect to the Maternity Benefit Amendment Act. However, within this particular Benefit Act, it also speaks about the establishment of the creatures. So what does the guideline speak here? So what it says is that in case there is an organization or an institution which has more than 50 or more employees, then these organizations will have to establish a creche within their office premises or within 500 meters from this particular institution or an organization. So what we have to understand here is this particular 50 or more employees basically means it is gender neutral. So it need not have to have only the women. So even men are accommodated in it. Why? Because these 50 employees can also be men. So fathers would also have to take care of their kids in this scenario. So we are living in an era where both the father as well as mother will have to equally take care of their kids. So this 50 that we are speaking about basically is a gender neutral perspective which may involve both men as well as women, and it may also involve only 50 men. So it is a general perspective that we are speaking about. So apart from this act, we also have another act which is called as the Factories Act of 1948. So this act further goes on to say that in case there are 30 female employees who are employed by the employer in an organization, even then it becomes an obligation for the employer to have a creche under the Factories Act of 1948. So in case there are 30 employees within that organization who are all females in this particular case, then even then creche facility will have to be provided, is what this Factories Act of 1948 say. And the most important point is all these creche facilities will have to be in the workplace or within the 500 meters of it, is what this guideline say. Further on, what this article goes on to say is that these timings for the opening of these creches will have to be from 8 to 10 hours and should be adjusted according to the shift system at the workplace. And then it further goes on to give the guidelines. So it says that a creche must have a minimum space of 10 to 12 square feet per child so that the child is able to play in this particular area. There should be no unsafe places such as open drains, deep and large pits, garbage bins near the center, so that the safety of the child is the most important factor, and the guidelines make sure that the safety of the child is taken into picture. It further says it should have at least one guard who should have undergone police verification. So security of this particular creature is very important. So it says that there will be a security personnel who will guard this particular creature, and this person who is appointed as a security personnel will also need a certification from the police department, and at least one supervisor per creature, and this happens within the creature so that they are able to monitor and supervise as to what is the condition of kids. And the next important point it says is a trained worker for every 10 children under 3 years or every 20 children above, along with a helper, and then this creche staff would have to be paid at least the minimum wages. So these are the guidelines that the central government has come up with, that all institutions or organizations will have to manage. And apart from this, the government has also recommended that no outsiders such as plumbers, drivers, electricians be allowed inside the creche when children are present, and this is to basically make sure that there is no sexual assault or there is no molestation or there is no physical violence that these people are perpetuating on these kids. That is why this particular recommendation has been taken place. And the most important point is a creche monitoring committee which will have a representations from the creche workers, parents as well as the administration needs to be formed, so that this will have the grievance addressal committee which will inquire into instances of sexual abuse. So all these organizations which have 50 or more employees will have to establish a creche, and they'll have to make sure that these guidelines are structurally followed. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. The next article says G20 urged to act on fugitive offenders. So what is the context here? So there are people like Nirav Modi, Vijay Mallya who have absconded and have also resisted every move from coming back to India. So we have also signed the repatriation treaties with countries like United Kingdom. However, what we also see is that the judicial process is very slow and there is lot of delay. This questions the efficacy of such a expatriation treaty. So in order to overcome this issue, the 9-point agenda has been suggested by India. So what are the steps that it has suggested? So the first important point that it suggests is that we need to have a strong and active cooperation. Currently what we have is that there are different set of domestic laws as well as the international laws. So both are in conflict. So in order to address this issue, what India has proposed is we need a cooperation setup and hierarchy as well as a structure, so that in case there is any economic offender who travels from one country to another, there is cooperation such that there is repatriation of this person that the home country requests for. So the second important point that this particular 9-point agenda makes is what we have to do is we have to deny the entry to these economic offenders. So you have number of countries where they are given havens to. So you have United Kingdom which is currently having Vijay Mallya. So what is being suggested by India is in this G20 countries to form a mechanism where all these countries deny entry and stop providing safe havens to all these fugitive economic offenders. And the third important point that it goes on to propose is it proposes for a cooperation in legal processes such as effective freezing of the proceeds of the crime, early return of the offenders, and efficient repatriation of the proceeds of the crime should be enhanced and streamlined. Why is this happening? We did just discuss that there is a legal process that is already established, but this legal process that we currently see has a lot of delay. So what the government is also expecting is that there are certain changes and amendments made so that the there is cooperation also at the legal level. And the fourth important point that it makes is there are principles of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, especially related to international cooperation. All this should be fully and effectively implemented. And the most important point that it also raises is in terms of the Financial Action Task Force. So what it goes about saying is that the Financial Action Task Force is one of those organizations which basically in money laundering and all these terrorist funding. It also wants the Financial Action Task Force to come up and address these issues of economic offenders. So what does it ask? So it basically goes on to come up with a definition. So currently what we have is number of definitions. Each country has its own set of definitions. So the domestic definitions are completely different from the international definitions. So what it requests the Financial Action Task Force is come up with a standard definition of who the fugitive economic defender is, so that all countries have a uniform and a common definition. So in case there is any readdressal that has to take place, we can stick back to this particular definition. And the second important point that it goes on to speak about is have a commonly refined procedures. So these procedures, what the Financial Action Task Force has to do is it has to ask all the countries. So once it has taken the input from all countries, come up with a commonly agreed as well as standardized procedures, so that we can identify who this person is and make sure that there is extradition of this person or there is judicial proceedings without any delay, and there is this person who is sent back to the home country after providing certain guidelines and assistance to the G20 countries. And the third important point that it also makes is that we have to make sure that there is timely and comprehensive exchange of information. So what it requests the Financial Action Task Force is, in case you see an economic offender of one country entering into another country and you see that this person is already voiced in another home country, you need to exchange information, share your best practices, and make sure that there are competent authorities who are able to spread this information to the home country. And the most important point that it also raises amongst this is to come up with a common platform. So what is this common platform that it is speaking about? So what it basically goes on to say is you will have number of successful cases of extradition. So this has to be taken as a case study process, and then you will also have certain gaps in the existing system of extradition as well as the legal programs. So we should be addressing these legal loopholes. So this common platform will have both the success stories as well as the failure stories. So we should be adapting more of the success stories, and any failures that we see in this particular issue, we will have to address those loopholes. So for which what we need is a common platform. And ultimately what this particular authority also says is that you also need to locate the properties of the economic offenders, for which what we need is the support from the G20 countries. So make sure that you identify the properties of the economic offenders, and in case you have identified the properties of these economic offenders, make sure that this property is confiscated, so that this money that is used from this particular confiscation can be used to pay back the tax debt in the country of residence of the economic offender. So this is what we need to understand in reference to the 9-point agenda that has been pushed by India in the G20 summit. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So what is the context here? So this article speaks from the perspective of taking steps to overcome issues which have arisen as a result of Cyclone Gaja. So this article basically speaks about the rehabilitation and the reconstruction that every organization and policy makers will have to do after a disaster has struck that particular locality. For which what we have to understand in reference to this article are certain statistics that has been provided by the World Health Organization. So what does the statistical evidence says? So it says that World Health Organization says that every year natural disasters claim about 90,000 lives and affect close to 160 million people worldwide. So what the World Health Organization says in this particular case is, because of these disasters which has been giving a cry to all the people, it has also raised certain health concerns. So what are these health concerns? It says that there was cholera outbreak after a massive earthquake that struck Haiti in 2010, and there was leptospirosis spike after a cyclone in Odisha in 1999, and you will also see a number of commonest diseases in the post-flood situation, and that will include the cholera, the typhoid, the jaundice, the leptospirosis, and there is also likelihood of dengue as well as the malaria. It further goes on to say that it is children who are more susceptible to all these kind of issues, and one such thing that happens is also called as the measles, and this was also seen in tsunami in Tamil Nadu. So this is primarily due to overcrowding of the relief centers. So what this article goes on to speak about here is that it has certain health concerns, and it has given a certain statistical evidence, and it has also said that what the government and the policy makers will have to work is on the rehabilitation as well as the reconstruction. So with respect to all the statistical evidence and all the health concerns that we have seen, what the World Health Organization wants is the focus of the health emergency as well as the disaster management to be broadened, and this includes what is called as the proactive approach. So what it discards is the reactive approach, which is based on response and recovery, and it espouses and supports a more proactive approach which emphasizes the prevention and mitigation in this particular case. So what is the most important part of this article is that we understand what is rehabilitation, we understand what is reconstruction, and what should the policy makers and the management authorities should do after a disaster has struck a particular region. So the most important point that we have to understand is what is rehabilitation and reconstruction, which is the heart of the disaster recovery phase. So the first point that we have to understand here is what is the difference between rehabilitation and reconstruction. So the rehabilitation and the reconstruction, they may sound similar, but they are not actually the same. So when we say rehabilitation, what it basically means, it is restoring those local services that are related to provisioning of the immediate needs. So it is all those short-term goals that the policy makers as well as the government will have to accomplish at the immediate level. And when we say reconstruction, what it basically means is the long-term plan. It is not the immediate plan, but the long-term plan that the policy makers as well as the management protocol that needs to be followed. So when we say rehabilitation, it is the immediate needs and the short-term goals, and when we say it is the reconstruction, it basically means it is the long-term goals as well as the far-off consequences that we need to think of. So what are the examples of rehabilitation, or what are the basic measures that we have to ensure is providing them of the basic entities like the safe drinking water, food as well as the sanitation. So when we say reconstruction, what it means is the long-term developmental assistance, and for which what we have to do is provide them the houses, set up communication network, provide them the electricity. So this will have a long-term implications. So the rehabilitation is totally different from the reconstruction, as rehabilitation involves the immediate effects and reconstruction involves the long-term developmental assistance. So further looking into this article, what we have to understand is rehabilitation in itself has three types of rehabilitation. One, it involves the social rehabilitation. The next, it involves the psychological rehabilitation, and the third involves the physical rehabilitation. So what is the social rehabilitation? So there are number of vulnerable groups. Let's take for example the elders, the orphans, the single parents with young children. So these are the vulnerable groups which will require certain social support in order to survive the impact of the disaster. So what you need to provide is the construction of the infrastructure at the immediate level, for which you need to have certain community centers, daycare centers, Anganwadis or old age homes, which becomes a very important part of the social rehabilitation. So what is the social rehabilitation basically means? You have certain vulnerable groups. These vulnerable groups will require certain support. So in order to accommodate all these people, you are providing a platform for these people to come and rest in a particular place, and that becomes an important part of social rehabilitation. So social rehabilitation means providing them certain infrastructure to come over and rest in a particular place. So the next important point is to do with the psychological rehabilitation. So what is the psychological rehabilitation? So you would have a number of people who would have lost their relatives, they would have lost their family members, they would have lost their friends. So they'll be in deep remorse, they'll be in utter shock because of this disaster event. So what we have to understand in this condition is we will have to empathize with them and be compassionate toward them. And in this particular case, you cannot see all section of people on a homogeneous background. So you have people from the high class, you have people from middle class, you have people from lower class. So you have all types of people. So you cannot picture them and compartmentalize them into one particular idea. So instead, what you need to make sure is you need to respect them for their traditions, you need to respect them for their value systems, you need to believe in what their practices are, and then see to them that they are all heterogeneous groups, and make sure that there is a systematic rehabilitation plan. So you cannot have a rigid approach to all these type of people, but instead you will have to be flexible in their approaches so that you can accommodate the beliefs of those people and be compassionate, because these are the ones who have lost their dear ones. So the psychological rehabilitation basically means that you can give your shoulders to these people and be sympathetic and empathetic and compassionate to these people who have lost their dear one. And the third important is the physical rehabilitation. So what is the physical rehabilitation? This basically means the reconstruction of the physical infrastructure. So this is a long-term program which involves the construction of the houses, the buildings, the railways, the roads, and so on. So when we say the physical rehabilitation, it basically has economics in it. So it is economic in nature, where we are providing certain agricultural rehabilitation or rehabilitation for the artisans or for the businessmen. So what we are indirectly doing is we are providing them the job creative opportunities as well as the employment generation opportunities, so their future becomes a secured one. So what this article basically goes on to say is that in spite of all these traumas that we have seen, what we have to make sure is that we are there for all these people, we are there to rehabilitate them, we are there to make sure that their future is actually intact and also prosperous. For this, what it calls for is a rehabilitative program from the disaster management schemes. So this is what we need to understand in reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So what is this article all about? What we are speaking is in reference to the measles. So there was one of the reports, and the report is Progress Toward Regional Measles Elimination Worldwide 2000 to 2017, which is one of the joint publications of the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. So what this report has basically gone on to say is that there has been an increase in the measles reporting in and around the world. So first thing that we have to understand here is what is this measles. So measles basically is a highly contagious, it is a viral disease. So kindly remember, it is a viral disease which can be a prospective question in your prelims examination. So what are the symptoms? So the first symptom is a high fever. Post this, what we will see is a running nose, cough, as well as red eyes. And finally, what we will see is a rash of tiny red spots which begins at the head and travels down the body, but the disease is contagious well before the rash begins. So these are the symptoms. And then how does it spread? So measles, also called as rubella, invade cells that line the back of the throat as well as the lungs. It is highly contagious and spreads through the air, and it is particularly dangerous for babies as well as the young children. So any physical contact with an infected person, or if you're close by to that infected person and if he happens to cough or even sneeze, then even the person close to it will catch the disease. So what are the complications because of the measles? So you will have what is called as encephalitis, which is a brain swelling that can leave children deaf or mentally impaired. And then you will have ear infection, pneumonia, as well as diarrhea. So what this report further goes on to say is that there are a number of people, and the number of cases being reported because of measles has increased over a period of time. Why has there been an increase? One is because you have a number of people who are neglecting this particular disease. and there is parental neglect, and the vaccination that was supposed to be provided to the children are not being provided. And the next important point it further goes on to make is due to the economic calamity in the Latin American countries. So because there economical crisis, because there is a lot of economic disparity, what you will see is that public health services have either stopped or they are being murdered by the dysfunction. So because there has been economic crisis and because parents are not vaccinating their children, this has led to increase in the measles, is what this article goes on to speak about. So moving on, let's look into some of the prelims practice questions. Which of the following statements is correct? Why are we discussing this? It is because we have just discussed about the measles. So the viruses can infect bacteria, fungi, plants. Select the correct answer using code given below. So the answer for this is 1, 2 and 3. So moving on, let's look into the next question. So the next question says, Mediterranean Sea is a border of which of the following countries? Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon and Syria. Select the correct answer. The answer for this is 3 and 4 only. So let's look into the map. So when you look into the map, you have Syria as well as Lebanon, which are bordering the Mediterranean Sea. So that is why the answer for it is 3 and 4. Also kindly remember the other countries that are bordering the Mediterranean Sea, which can be a prospective question in your prelims examination. So moving on, let's look into the next question. It says, consider the following about the call money market. It is an interbank money market where funds are borrowed and lent for 1 day. Collateral is required to borrow money from this market. Select the correct answer using the code given below, and the answer for this is only 1. So what is the explanation for this? Call money is mainly used by the banks to meet their temporary requirement. They borrow and lend money from each other normally on a daily basis. So if it is payable on demand and its maturity period varies in between 1 day to a fortnight. If it is for 1 day, it is called as call money. If it is more than a day, it is called as notice money, and for which what we require is no collateral, and that is why the answer to this is A only. So the rate of interest paid on call money loan is known as the call rate. So let's look into the mains practice question. So it says, the Indian civil service is hamstrung by political interference, outdated personal procedures and a mixed record on policy implementation, and it is in need of urgent reform. Discuss. So even before we look into the answer, what I would request you guys is, please attempt this particular question. Write all your answers on the comment section so that we can look it from the BYJU'S team as well as have a peer review. So let's discuss the answer for this particular question. So it says, the Indian civil service structure is almost a perfect fit with the ideal bureaucratic arrangement as outlined by the Max Weber, appointed on the basis of meritocracy. This steel frame of India is always marred with political pressure, constant wrath of political masters and lack of opportunities for better execution. So because we are speaking about the Indian civil service, just give a basic introduction of what it is all about, because it is in line with the Weberian model of bureaucracy, and the civil servants are also appointed on the basis of merit. And then it says, it has hamstrung by the political interference, outdated personal procedures and a mixed record on policy implementation. So what it says is the concerns. So the political interference generates substantial inefficiency. The best officers do not always occupy the important positions, while political loyalty offers bureaucrats an alternative path to career success. Proper execution of schemes and act invites frequent transfers, acting as a discouragement to the motivating officers, leading to uncertainty. So you can always give the example, and that is Ashok Khemka. There is also something called as the Khemka syndrome, which basically means the transfers that the civil servants basically go through. So you can quote this as the Khemka syndrome in case there is frequent transfers. And the next point it makes is, lack of specialization in the fast changing world could damage the intended objective due to technicalities associated with it. This will further the status quo and resistant to change, leading to failed program and policies. And promotions are currently on the basis of seniority, which will not be an incentive for the innovation. So these are the various concerns that have been voiced. However, what we will also have to give is the urgent reforms. So what are these reforms? So the Indian government need to reshape the recruitment and promotion process, improve performance based assessment of individual officers, and adopt safeguards that promote accountability while protecting bureaucrats from political meddling. Legislation needs to be passed that protects bureaucrats against politically motivated transfers and posting, which is taken care by a suitable committee. And there needs to be stability of tenure as suggested by the Supreme Court, merit and innovation with a layer of seniority to give boost for the improvement. And the government should consider the proposal that officers deemed unfit for further service at certain career benchmarks be compulsorily retired through a transparent and the uniform system of performance review. So the conclusion should be, so this will require a transformation at the political and institutional level to principles of constitutionalism and prevent further eroding and decline. So we need to have the start, we need to have the concerns, we need to come up with reforms as well as end it up with conclusion, so that this becomes a holistic answer. So in case you have liked our initiative, please do encourage us by liking the video and commenting on the comment section. Thank you for watching. All the best.